My parents cut me off for being left-handed. Now they insist I cover my sister's college tuition. My own mother held my arm over a gas stove burner until I passed out from the pain. Her reason? I was left-handed. That night, though, was only the beginning of a lifetime of betrayal that would culminate in an impossible choice. The kitchen hummed with a false peace. Fluorescent lights cast a stark, unfeeling glow over the laminate countertop where my geometry proofs lay scattered. Outside, the evening cicadas sang their relentless, summer song, oblivious to the silence that was beginning to crackle inside the house, thick and heavy like static electricity before a storm. I was 16, focused on my geometry homework, a test looming the next day. My sister, Mallory, sat across from me, supposedly studying, but her eyes were narrowed, a faint, cruel curve to her lips. She watched me with that familiar predatory glint, always waiting for the inevitable spark, the moment the fragile piece would shatter. I should have known something was wrong when the quiet deepened, unnatural and cold. My mother, Deborah, stopped stirring the dinner pot. My father, Robert, slowly lowered his newspaper, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle twitching near his ear. They weren't looking at me, not exactly. They were staring at my hand. My left hand, holding the pencil. See, I'm left-handed. I've been left-handed since I could grasp a crayon. In my family, that was a curse. A moral failing. My parents believed it was wrong, fundamentally broken, a sign of something sinister within me that needed to be fixed. My entire childhood was an elaborate, painful attempt to cure me. When I was 5, Deborah would pry the crayon from my left hand, jamming it into my right, over and over until my vision blurred with tears. At 8, Robert made me write lines every night for a month. I will use my proper hand. I will use my proper hand. 500 times. My hand cramped, my wrist ached, but it didn't change anything. My brain just wasn't wired that way. But the worst was when I was 12. I was doing homework, again, writing with my left hand because my parents weren't home, and I was exhausted from pretending. I didn't hear Deborah come in. Didn't know she was there until her hand clamped onto my left wrist, yanking me from the chair so hard my shoulder popped. I told you, she hissed, her voice trembling, not with anger, but something colder, something that looked like fear, but felt like pure hatred. I told you what would happen if you kept using this hand. She dragged me to the kitchen. The gas burner ignited with a whoosh. And she held my forearm, my innocent, cursed left arm, over the searing flame until I was screaming, a high-pitched, desperate sound that almost brought the neighbors to our door. The scar is still there. A mottled, shiny patch of skin on my inner forearm that never quite healed right, a constant reminder. When people ask, I tell them it was a cooking accident. Not technically a lie. After that, I learned. I learned to write with my right hand when they were watching. To eat, to wave, to do everything with my right hand under their scrutinizing gaze. But when I was alone, I was still Eliza. Still left-handed. Still the daughter they couldn't fix. Mallory knew, of course. She always knew. And she used it like a weapon. 2 years younger, blonde where I was brunette, right-handed where I was wrong. She was everything they wanted. And she reveled in my disgrace. She'd catch me writing left-handed and threaten to tell. She'd accidentally knock things into my left hand at dinner, just so my parents would see me catch them wrong. Once, alone in our room, she told me she wished I'd never been born because then she wouldn't have to share a room with someone cursed. That was their word, cursed. Like left-handedness was a disease I'd caught, a divine punishment. Deborah used to say it came from her grandmother, also left-handed, who died young and alone. It's a sign, she'd whisper, shaking her head. A sign that something's wrong with your soul. So, when Robert looked at me across that kitchen table, on my 16th birthday, and saw me writing with my left hand, saw that all their years of training, of punishment, and that horrible night by the stove hadn't fixed me, something in his face just shut down. "You're still doing it," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, pencil frozen mid-stroke, watching his face drain of all expression, replaced by something I'd never seen before. It was like he was looking at a stranger, like he'd finally given up. "Robert," Deborah said from the stove, her voice thin, a warning. But my father was already standing, calmly folding his newspaper, placing it on the table with a terrifying precision, like he was about to do something he'd considered for a very long time. "Get a bag," he said to Deborah. "One bag. She can take her clothes." I remember the pencil slipping from my fingers, rolling across my geometry homework, and dropping off the edge of the table. I remember thinking, this can't be happening, even as Deborah walked past me toward the hallway closet. Even as Mallory's face split into a wide, triumphant grin, like Christmas had come early. "Dad," I croaked, my voice high and shaky, disgustingly young. "Dad, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I'll use my right hand. I promise I'll never." It's too late. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was fixed on my homework, on the faint pencil marks I'd made with my wrong hand. "We've tried everything. We've given you 16 years, and you're still." He shook his head slowly. "We can't have this in our home anymore. It's not right. It's not natural." Deborah returned with a black plastic garbage bag, the kind we used for yard waste. She held it out to me without meeting my eyes. "You have 10 minutes, she said. "Take what you can carry." I looked at Mallory. Why? Maybe I hoped for a flicker of humanity, a sign that she understood this was insane. But she was just sitting there, chin propped on her hand, watching me like I was a reality show she was thoroughly enjoying. "Bye, freak," she said, wiggling her fingers in a little wave that made my stomach churn. I don't remember packing. I don't remember choosing what to take. I just remember standing on the front porch in my socks. I'd forgotten shoes, clutching a garbage bag full of whatever I'd blindly grabbed. Robert closed the door in my face. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything at all. He just closed the door and turned off the porch light, leaving me there in the suffocating dark. I walked 3 miles to my Aunt Carol's house. She was Deborah's sister, the family black sheep because she'd moved away, married a man my grandparents didn't approve of, and generally refused to conform to their twisted rules. I'd only met her a handful of times, but she'd always been kind, always slipped me extra dessert, always told me I was perfect exactly the way I was. When she opened the door and saw me, barefoot and shaking, clutching that garbage bag, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, wrapped me in a blanket, and let me cry until I thought my chest would crack. "It's the hand thing, isn't it?" she said finally, not a question. When I nodded, she closed her eyes. "I should have gotten you out of there years ago. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim took me in that night. They enrolled me in a new school, paid for therapy, and eventually college. They became my real family, the ones who taught me what it meant to be loved without conditions." I never spoke to my parents again. Not once in 19 years. I kept loose tabs, though. Google alerts. Mallory's social media, once or twice a year, just to remind myself I'd made the right choice by never looking back. I knew when Robert retired, when they moved to a smaller place. I knew Mallory had dropped out of college after her sophomore year, though I never found out why. 19 years of silence. And suddenly, they were on my doorstep, like nothing had ever happened. I let them in, not because I wanted their apology. I knew it wouldn't be genuine, but because I wanted to know what they were really after. They thought I'd forgotten. They thought I'd softened. They had no idea who I'd become. Deborah started crying before she even sat down. Not real tears, I don't think, but that performative wetness she used to summon when she wanted sympathy. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, then looked around my living room, appraising it for resale value. "This is beautiful, Eliza," she cooed, using the name I hadn't heard from her lips in nearly 2 decades. "You've done so well for yourself. We always knew you would." I stayed standing by the door. I offered no drinks, no invitation to sit comfortably. "Why are you here?" I said, my voice as flat as the Kansas plains. Robert was doing that thing he used to do, his eyes flitting around the room, avoiding mine. He looked at my bookshelf, my fireplace, the framed photos on my mantel. "We've been thinking a lot about family lately," Deborah began, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "About how we let things fall apart. About how we could have handled things differently. And we realized, we don't want to die without making things right with you." "We're not dying," Robert added quickly, as if that was supposed to be reassuring. We're healthy. We just mean we're getting older. We don't have forever. I waited. I knew the setup. The buttering up before the knife. Mallory's doing well, Deborah continued, watching my face for a reaction. She's engaged to a wonderful man, Ethan, from a very good family. They're planning a spring wedding. Good for her, I said, my voice neutral, like we were discussing the weather. The thing is, Deborah glanced at Robert. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The thing is, she's been accepted to this very prestigious business school. Very exclusive, very expensive, very difficult to get into. Okay, I replied. Well, that's where she needs to go. Ethan's family, they have certain expectations about education, about accomplishments. And Mallory needs this degree to really cement her place with them. You understand? I understood perfectly. Mallory had found herself a rich fiancé with a snobby family, and now she needed fancy credentials to prove she was good enough. What does any of this have to do with me? I asked. My parents exchanged another look. Deborah's tears had vanished. Her eyes were dry now, calculating. Times have been difficult, Robert said slowly. The economy. Retirement. We've had some setbacks. We're not in a position to help Mallory with her tuition. And we thought, Deborah jumped in, leaning forward as if about to deliver exciting news. Since you've done so well for yourself, since you clearly have the resources, we thought maybe you'd want to help your sister. As a family gesture. To show that you've forgiven us and you're ready to move forward together. There it was. The ask. 19 years of silence, and they show up at my door wanting money for the daughter they chose to keep. No, I said. Deborah blinked rapidly, like I'd just spoken a foreign language. I'm sorry. No. I won't pay for Mallory's college. Was there anything else? Now, wait just a minute, Robert said, sitting straighter. You haven't even thought about it. This is family we're talking about. Your own sister. My sister watched me get burned and did nothing. My sister spent years making my life miserable and was thrilled when you threw me out. She's not my family. She never was. That's not fair, Deborah snapped, her voice sharp. You were children. Children are cruel sometimes. You can't hold that against her forever. I can, I said, my gaze unwavering. Watch me. Robert's face was reddening now, that old familiar flush I remembered from my childhood. The one that meant I'd pushed too far, said too much, existed too loudly. You've always been selfish, he seethed. Even as a child. Always thinking about yourself, never about the family. We spent 16 years trying to help. You, and you never appreciated any of it. Help me. I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You burned me. You threw me out on the street. That's not help. We did what we had to do, Deborah said, her voice hard. We couldn't have that influence in our home anymore. Not with Mallory there. We had to think about her future. And how's her future looking now? I asked, a bitter smirk playing on my lips. Dropped out of college. Begging her estranged sister for money. Sounds like you did a great job protecting her. She didn't drop out. Robert snapped. She lost her scholarship. There's a difference. Something in the way he said it made me pause. The defensiveness. The way his eyes slid away from mine right after. Lost it how? I pressed. Silence. Deborah's hands twisted in her lap. Robert's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. It doesn't matter how, Deborah said finally. The point is she needs help now, and you're in a position to give it. Lost it how? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. There was an incident, Robert mumbled. A misunderstanding. The school overreacted. What kind of incident? More silence. They looked at each other now, having some kind of wordless, tense conversation. I watched their faces, the furrow in Deborah's brow, the tiny shake of Robert's head. It was nothing, Deborah said. A minor traffic violation. But the school had these ridiculous policies about student conduct. Traffic violation, I stated. You mean she got a DUI? The way they both froze told me everything. It wasn't. Robert started, then stopped, swallowed, started again. It was one mistake. One night of bad judgment. She was young. She didn't know any better. Was anyone hurt? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the cold dread starting to spread in my chest. The silence this time was different, heavier. Deborah's face had gone pale, and she was gripping her purse strap so hard her knuckles were white. Was anyone hurt? I said again, louder now. It was an accident, Deborah whispered. She didn't mean to. She was barely over the limit, and it was dark, and the girl just stepped out of nowhere. The girl just stepped out of nowhere. A block of ice settled in my chest. What happened to the girl? She's fine, Robert said quickly. Too quickly. She recovered. She's completely fine now. Recovered from what? Neither of them answered. They wouldn't look at me. Wouldn't look at each other. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked, each second feeling like an hour. Tell me what happened, I said, and my voice was quiet, dangerously so. Tell me exactly what happened, or I'm calling the police right now and asking them to look up any accidents involving Mallory in the last 5 years. Deborah made a sound that was almost a sob. Her leg, she choked out. The girl's leg was injured. She needed surgery, but she's fine now. She's walking. She's completely— How many surgeries, Deborah? Please. How many? 3. Robert's voice was barely audible. 3 surgeries. And there's some ongoing issues. But we took care of it. We handled it. Handled it how? We came to an arrangement with the family. He was looking at his shoes again, speaking to the floor. They agreed not to press charges. Mallory agreed to take some classes, do some community service. Everyone agreed it was better to just move on. You paid them off, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion now, just chilling clarity. You paid the family to keep quiet so Mallory wouldn't have a record. We did what we had to do to protect our daughter. Deborah's voice had steel in it now, defensive and hard. Any parent would have done the same. How much? She pressed her lips together. How much did it cost to make a felony disappear? I pushed. 10,000. Robert said, and he finally looked up at me. His eyes were wet, roomy with age and something else. Defeat. The family didn't have a lawyer. They didn't know what they could have gotten. They just wanted enough to cover her medical bills. So, we gave them $10,000, and they signed the papers, and that was it. I sat back in my chair, my mind spinning. $10,000. That's all it had cost to make Mallory's crime disappear. That's all the family had asked for because they were scared and overwhelmed and didn't know any better. And my parents had jumped at the deal, happy to pay a fraction of what the case could have been worth, just to keep their precious daughter out of prison. And now they were broke anyway. Not because of the settlement, but because they had spent the last 4 years funding Mallory's lifestyle, her apartment, her car, her vacations, all the things she needed to maintain the image of a successful young woman worthy of marrying into a wealthy family. So, let me understand this, I said slowly, enunciating every word. Mallory nearly killed someone. You paid off the family for $10,000 because they didn't know any better. And now you're broke because you've been funding her entire life ever since. And you want me to pay for her college? It's not like that. Deborah cried. You're making it sound. That's exactly what it's like. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady, firm. Mallory should be in prison right now. She should have a felony record. Instead, she's engaged to some rich guy and trying to get into business school. And you want me to fund that? You want me to help the daughter you protected after she destroyed someone's life, when you threw me out for writing with my left hand. I walked to the front door. I opened it wide. Get out, I said. Robert stood up slowly, like his bones ached. He looked at me as he passed, and I expected to see shame, or guilt, or something like regret. But all I saw was weariness. Frustration. Like I was being unreasonable. Deborah stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same floral scent she'd worn when I was a kid. You were always cruel, she said softly, her eyes cold as ice. Even as a child. Cold and selfish and cruel. We tried so hard to love you, and you made it impossible. I'm glad we sent you away. You would have destroyed this family if you'd stayed. I smiled at her. It felt strange on my face. I didn't destroy this family. Mallory did. The difference is, you let her. She walked out without another word. I watched Robert's old Buick pull out of my driveway, turn down the street, and disappear around the corner. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. But it wasn't from sadness. It was from pure, unadulterated rage. Mallory had nearly killed someone and walked away clean, while I got thrown out for being left-handed. Her rich fiancé had no idea who he was marrying. But then, 3 weeks later, my sister showed up at my door, and everything got so much worse. I'd spent those weeks digging, finding out everything I could about Ethan, his family, their law firm, their charitable foundations, their society connections. I learned his father had been a federal prosecutor before going into private practice. His mother came from old money and sat on the boards of half a dozen nonprofits. They were the kind of family who vetted everyone who got close to them, who ran background checks on business partners. And probably romantic interests too. Which meant either they hadn't checked on Mallory, or Mallory had somehow hidden everything. I was still trying to figure out how to approach Ethan when the doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I sighed and pushed back from my desk. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and felt my whole body go cold. Mallory was standing on my porch. She looked different than in her Instagram photos, thinner, more polished. She wore a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was blown out in perfect waves. She looked like she was about to walk into a country club luncheon, not show up unannounced at the house of the sister she hadn't seen since we were teenagers. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, my hand on the doorknob. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could call the police. I could do 100 things other than open this door and face the person who had made my childhood a living hell. But I'd spent 19 years running from my family, hiding, building walls, and I was tired of being afraid. I opened the door. "Eliza," Mallory said, and she smiled. The same sweet, innocent smile she used to give me right before she told our parents I'd been using my left hand again. "It's so good to see you." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, one hand on the door, the other on the frame, blocking the entrance. Her smile flickered. "Can I come in? We should talk. We have nothing to talk about." "Oh, I think we do." Her voice was still sweet, but there was something underneath it now. Something sharp. "Mom and Dad told me about their visit. About how you refused to help. I thought maybe I could change your mind. You can't. See, that's the thing." She took a step closer, and I could smell her perfume, something expensive and cloying. "I don't think you understand the situation you're in. I don't think you understand what's at stake here." "I understand perfectly. You want money." I said no. End of conversation. It's not that simple. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did Mom and Dad tell you about my fiancé, Ethan? His family is, well, they're everything. Old money, old connections, the kind of people who can make things happen or make things disappear. Good for you. They're also the kind of people who care very much about reputation, about image, about making sure everyone who carries their name is appropriate." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Ethan doesn't know about you, by the way. As far as he knows, I'm an only child. I told him my parents tried for years to have more children but couldn't. He found it very tragic." I felt something twist in my chest. Not surprise, exactly. I'd assumed she'd erased me from her history. But hearing her say it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like I was just an inconvenience she'd tidied away. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what will happen if you don't help me." She leaned in closer, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I've already talked to Ethan about the possibility of you showing up. I told him I have an estranged relative who's troubled, mentally unstable. Someone who was removed from our home as a teenager because she was violent and dangerous. I told him this person might try to contact him at some point, might try to tell him lies about me, and he should ignore anything she says." The world seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the doorframe harder. "He was very understanding," Mallory continued, a smug satisfaction in her tone. "He said, every family has someone like that. A black sheep. A problem child. He promised he wouldn't engage with anyone who tried to spread lies about me." I stared at her, my mind racing, trying to process what she was telling me. She'd gotten ahead of me. She'd already poisoned the well. Already made sure that anything I said to Ethan would be dismissed as the ravings of a crazy person. You're lying, I said, but my voice came out weaker than I wanted. Am I? She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and held it up so I could see the screen. A text conversation. Ethan's name at the top. Just talked to you about the family situation. He knows about my troubled relative now. He was so sweet about it. Said he'd never let anyone come between us. Then Ethan's reply, of course not. Family stuff is complicated. I've got your back. Love you. Mallory tucked her phone away, still smiling. So, here's how this is going to work. You're going to pay for my tuition $150,000 for 2 years. And in exchange, I'll disappear from your life forever. You'll never hear from me or mom and dad again. We'll all just pretend you don't exist, which, let's be honest, is what everyone wants anyway. Her smile turned sharp. And if I don't? Then I'll make your life very, very difficult. I've already warned Ethan. That was just the beginning. If you don't pay up, I'll find your employer, your neighbors, your friends. I'll tell everyone you know that you're violent and unstable and dangerous. And when you try to defend yourself, when you try to tell people the truth about our family, no one will believe you because I'll have already laid the groundwork. She reached out and patted my cheek, a gesture so condescending it made my skin crawl. Think about it, she said. I'll be in touch. She turned and walked down my front steps, got into a sleek white BMW, and drove away. I stood in the doorway for a long time after she left. My hands were shaking. My mind was spinning. She'd outmaneuvered me before I even knew we were playing a game. I went inside and sat on my couch, trying to think. Mallory had already talked to Ethan. She'd painted me as mentally unstable, dangerous, someone whose words couldn't be trusted. If I reached out to him now, he'd probably dismiss me immediately. He'd probably tell Mallory about it, and she'd use it as more ammunition against me. But I couldn't just do nothing. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't pay $150,000 to the sister who had tormented me my entire childhood, who had watched me get burned and laughed, who had waved at me while I stood on the porch with nothing but a garbage bag. And I couldn't let Ethan marry someone who had nearly killed a woman and covered it up. He deserved to know who she really was, even if he didn't want to hear it. Mallory had warned him about me. She'd told him to ignore anything I said. But she couldn't have prepared him for actual evidence. She couldn't explain away court documents and settlement records and a scar on my arm that proved what my family was really like. I just had to find a way to make him look at them. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Carol. I need your help, I said when she answered. I need to find records of a settlement. Something that was sealed. Something my parents paid to make disappear. Carol was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me everything." So I did. The visit from my parents, what I'd learned about Mallory's accident, the cover-up, the blackmail, all of it. When I finished, she let out a long breath. I always knew they'd come crawling back eventually. I just thought it would be when they needed a kidney, not tuition money. Can you help me find the records? I know someone who might be able to dig them up. My friend Brenda works at the courthouse downtown. She knows how to navigate sealed files. Carol paused. It's not strictly legal what I'm asking her to do. But if you're sure this is what you want. I'm sure. Then I'll call her today. Mallory thought she'd already won. She thought she'd blocked every path I could take. But she forgot one thing. She warned him I was crazy. She never thought I'd have proof. I was going to email her fiancé directly and make him look at every document, every record, every piece of evidence that proved who she really was. Mallory poisoned the well. I was about to show him what was really in the water. It took Brenda 3 days to find the records. She sent them to Carol, who forwarded them to me with a note that said, "Be careful with these and be sure." I was sure. The documents were damning. Mallory had been nearly twice the legal limit when she hit a woman in a crosswalk outside campus. The victim, Sarah, had been 22 years old, a nursing student walking home from her shift at the hospital. The impact had shattered her leg in 4 places. She'd needed 3 surgeries. The settlement had been for $10,000, paid in a single lump sum. In exchange, the family had agreed not to press charges and not to speak publicly about the accident. $10,000. That's what my sister had paid to walk away from nearly killing someone. Less than the cost of a used car. Now I had evidence. Real, verifiable evidence that Mallory was not who she pretended to be. The question was how to get Ethan to look at it. I thought about what Mallory had said. He already thinks you're crazy. Anything you say will just prove me right. She was probably right. If I sent Ethan a message out of the blue, he might delete it without reading. If I showed up at his office, he might call security. She'd prepared him for exactly this scenario. But I had to try, because the alternative was paying Mallory off or letting her destroy my reputation. And I wasn't willing to do either. I found Ethan's email through his company's website. I spent 2 hours drafting a message, deleting it, starting over. Finally, I settled on something short and direct. Ethan, my name is Eliza. I'm Mallory's older sister. I know she's told you about me, and I know what she's told you. I'm writing anyway because I have information you need to see before your wedding. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to look at the documents I've attached and verify them yourself. If they're fake, you'll know I'm exactly who Mallory says I am. But if they're real, you deserve to know who you're actually marrying. Please, just look. I attached the court filings, the settlement agreement, Mallory's blood alcohol level from the police report. Then I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. I didn't expect a response. I figured he'd see my name, remember what Mallory had told him, and delete the email without opening it. But the next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. Ethan had replied. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Mallory warned me you might try something like this. She told me you were removed from her family as a teenager because you were violent and unstable. She told me you might try to contact me with fabricated lies. I'm not going to engage with whatever delusions you're operating under. Do not contact me again. I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt something different. First, despair. He wasn't going to listen. Mallory had won. Then, anger. He hadn't even looked at the documents. He dismissed me without bothering to check if what I was saying was true. Finally, determination. Because his email told me something important, he was defensive. He was angry. Which meant some part of him wasn't sure. Some part of him had looked at my message and felt a flicker of doubt. I just had to make that flicker into a flame. I wrote back. I understand why you don't trust me. Mallory told you exactly what to think about me before I ever had a chance to speak. That's what she does. She controls the narrative. She makes sure everyone sees exactly what she wants them to see. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust verifiable facts. The documents I sent you are real. Court filings, settlement records, police reports. They have case numbers. They have dates. They have signatures. You can verify every single one of them yourself. If I'm lying, if these documents are fabricated, then proving it should be easy. Call the courthouse. Request the records. Have your father's law firm look into it. Do whatever you need to do to prove that I'm the mentally unstable liar Mallory says I am. But if you're afraid to check, if you'd rather not know, then ask yourself why. Ask yourself why Mallory told you I was dangerous before I ever tried to contact you. Ask yourself why she made you promise to ignore anything I said. Ask yourself why she's so determined to make sure you never hear my side of the story. I'm not going to contact you again. You have the documents. You have the case numbers. What you do with them is up to you. I sent the email. Then I put my phone down and waited. The next 2 days were agony. I checked my email obsessively, looking for any sign that Ethan had responded. But there was nothing. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. I started to think I'd failed, that he deleted my second email just like I'd told him not to, that Mallory had one after all. Then, on the 3rd day, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line was empty. The body had only 5 words. Can we meet in person? I stared at the screen for a full minute before I could bring myself to respond. Yes. Name a time and place. We agreed to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Public enough that neither of us had to worry about the other one being dangerous. I got there 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table in the back corner where I could see the door. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. This was my one shot. If I couldn't convince him, I'd never get another chance. Ethan walked in at exactly 3 p.m. He looked different than I'd expected. The photos I'd seen online showed someone polished and confident, all expensive suits and easy smiles. The man walking toward me now looked tired. His suit was rumpled, like he'd slept in it. His eyes had dark circles under them. His jaw was tight with tension. He spotted me and walked over slowly, like he was approaching something that might bite. "Eliza," he said. "Ethan." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Thank you for coming." He sat. He didn't order anything, just clasped his hands on the table and looked at me. His eyes were guarded, suspicious, searching for signs of the crazy person Mallory had described. "Before we start," he said, "I want you to know that I almost didn't come. I almost deleted your emails and blocked your address and forgot you existed. That's what Mallory told me to do. That's what made sense. So, why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. "Because I checked the case numbers," he finally said. "The ones in those documents you sent. I had someone at my father's firm pull the records. And they were real. Everything you sent me was real." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "But that doesn't mean I believe you," he continued, and his voice hardened. "Documents can be obtained for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you're trying to blackmail Mallory. Maybe you're trying to extort her, and this is your leverage. Just because the accident happened doesn't mean everything else you're saying is true." "Fair enough," I said. "What would convince you?" He studied me for a long moment. "Tell me about your childhood. Tell me why Mallory says you were removed from the home. She says I was violent, unstable, dangerous." "That's not what happened." I kept my voice steady. "Then what did happen?" I took a breath. This was the part I'd been dreading. The part where I had to rip open the oldest wound I had and show it to a stranger who might not even believe me. "My parents have this belief," I said slowly. "A superstition, I guess you'd call it. They think left-handedness is a curse. A sign that something's wrong with your soul." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't say anything. "I'm left-handed," I continued. "I've been left-handed since I could hold a crayon, and my parents spent my entire childhood trying to fix me. Trying to make me right. Punishing me when I couldn't." "Punishing you how?" I hesitated. This was the moment, the point of no return. "When I was 12, I said, my mother caught me writing with my left hand. She dragged me to the kitchen. She turned on the stove, and she held my arm over the burner until I passed out from the pain." Ethan's face went still. "For years later, my father caught me writing with my left hand at the dinner table. He decided he'd had enough. He gave me a garbage bag, told me I had 10 minutes to pack, and threw me out of the house. I was 16 years old." Silence stretched between us. Ethan was staring at me, his expression unreadable. He shook his head. "That's an incredible story, if it's true." "It's true. But I only have your word for it." He leaned back in his chair, and something shifted in his face. The suspicion was back, harder than before. "Look, I came here because the documents were real, but sitting here listening to you, I don't know. This whole thing sounds like something out of a movie. Parents who throw their kid out for being left-handed. A mother who burns her own child. It's a lot to believe." "I understand, and frankly," he continued, talking over me, "the more I think about it, the more this feels like a setup. Mallory warned me this might happen. She said you were manipulative. She said you'd have a whole sob story prepared, something designed to make me feel sorry for you." He uncrossed his arms and put his hands on the table, like he was about to stand up. "I think I've heard enough." My heart seized. He was leaving. He was actually leaving. After everything I'd done to get here, after all the evidence I'd gathered, he was going to walk out and marry Mallory anyway. "Wait," I said, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. "Please, just wait." He paused halfway out of his chair. His eyes were cold. "Give me one reason." I thought about everything I'd been through. 19 years of silence. 19 years of carrying this alone. And now I was sitting across from the one person who could actually hold Mallory accountable. And he was about to walk away because he thought I was lying. I pulled back my sleeve. "This," I said, and I placed my forearm on the table between us. "This is why you should wait." The scar was ugly in the harsh coffee shop lighting. Mottled and shiny. The skin puckered and discolored where it had healed wrong. It looked exactly like what it was, a burn that had been inflicted deliberately, held in place until the damage was done. Ethan froze. He was still half standing, one hand on the back of his chair, but his eyes were locked on my arm. "That's not a story," I said quietly. "That's not something I made up. That's what my mother did to me when I was 12 years old because I wrote with the wrong hand." He slowly sank back into his chair. His face had gone pale. "Jesus," he whispered. "I was doing homework," I continued, my voice steady, distant. "Writing with my left hand because I didn't know she'd come home early." She grabbed me and dragged me to the kitchen and held my arm over the burner until I passed out. I woke up on the kitchen floor with my arm wrapped in a dish towel. She told me if I ever used my left hand again, it would be worse. Ethan was still staring at the scar. His mouth was slightly open. His breathing had gone shallow. "And Mallory?" I pulled my sleeve back down. She was 14 years old. Old enough to call for help. Old enough to try to stop it. But she didn't. She just watched me scream. And 4 years later, when my father finally threw me out, she waved at me from the window and said, "Bye, freak." Ethan was quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were different. The suspicion was still there, but it was fighting with something else now. Something that looked like horror. "Why didn't you tell me about the scar in your emails? Would you have believed me? Would you have agreed to meet me if I'd said, 'By the way, I have a burn scar from when my mother tortured me'?" I shook my head. "You would have thought I was crazy. You would have deleted the email and never looked back. The only way to make you understand was to show you in person." He nodded slowly. I could see him processing, trying to fit this new information into the picture he had of his fiancée. "She told me she was an only child," he said finally. "She told me her parents tried for years to have more children but couldn't. She told me her childhood was happy normal. She's good at that. At making people see what she wants them to see. Why would she lie about having a sister? Because she knew I might try to contact you someday. Because she knew there was a chance you'd find out about her past, and she wanted to make sure you wouldn't believe anything I said." I leaned forward slightly. "Think about it, Ethan. She preemptively told you about a crazy, violent relative who might try to contact you with lies. She made you promise to ignore anything this person said. Why would she do that unless she was afraid of what I might tell you?" His jaw tightened. I could see him running through conversations in his mind, looking for signs he'd missed. "She said she was protecting me," he said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. "Protecting you from what? From the truth? From someone who wanted to hurt her." My voice was calm, steady. "Have I tried to hurt her? I sent you documents. I asked you to verify them. I offered to meet you in person and tell you my side of the story. I showed you the scar that proves what my family is really like. Does that sound like someone who wants to cause harm or someone who wants you to know the truth?" Ethan didn't answer. He was looking at the table, at his clasped hands, at anything except me. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it," I said. "You verified the documents yourself. You saw the scar with your own eyes. Mallory hit a woman who was walking in a crosswalk. She shattered her leg in 4 places. She needed 3 surgeries. And instead of facing consequences, Mallory's family paid $10,000 to make it all go away." "10,000, Ethan repeated. "That's nothing. That's not even close to what a case like that would be worth." The family didn't have a lawyer. They didn't know what they could have gotten. They were scared and overwhelmed and just wanted enough to cover the medical bills. My parents jumped at the deal. I paused. That's who they are. That's who Mallory is. People who take advantage of others when they're at their most vulnerable. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet. "If this is true," he said slowly, "if everything you're telling me is true, then the woman I'm engaged to is someone I don't know at all. I can't tell you what to do with that information. That's your choice. But I thought you deserved the chance to make an informed decision before you married into this family." "Why?" His voice cracked on the word. "Why do you care what happens to me? We've never met. I'm a stranger to you." I thought about the question. About 19 years of anger and grief and the burning need to see justice done. "Because Mallory has never faced consequences," I said. "Not for what she did to me. Not for what she did to that woman she hit. She's spent her whole life hurting people and walking away clean. And everyone around her has enabled it. My parents, the family who took the settlement, everyone. I met his eyes. You're the first person in a position to actually hold her accountable. The first person who might be willing to say, no, this isn't okay. I'm not going to pretend this is normal. I'm not asking you to do this for me. I'm asking you to do it because it's right. Because people like Mallory only get away with things when everyone around them looks the other way. Ethan stared at me. His face was unreadable. Then he stood up. I need time, he said. I need to think about this. I need to. He shook his head. I don't know what I need. Take all the time you need. And if I decide you're lying? He met my eyes. If I decide this is all some elaborate scheme to hurt Mallory then you'll marry her and I'll never contact you again. I held his gaze. But you verified the documents yourself. You saw the scar. You know what's real and what isn't. The question is whether you're willing to act on it. He nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I sat there for a long time after he left. My coffee had gone cold. The afternoon light was fading. I didn't know if I'd succeeded or failed. I'd done everything I could. I'd given him the evidence. I'd told him the truth. I'd shown him the scar that proved my story wasn't a fabrication. The rest was up to him. The next week was the hardest of my life. I didn't hear from Ethan. I didn't hear from Mallory either, which I took as a sign that he hadn't told her about our meeting. But I also didn't know what he was thinking, what he was deciding, whether he was going to believe me or convince himself that I was exactly the person Mallory had described. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I checked Mallory's Instagram obsessively, looking for any sign that something had changed. But her posts kept coming, steady and cheerful and oblivious. Photos of wedding dress shopping, photos of cake tastings, photos of her and Ethan looking happy and in love. Maybe he didn't believe me, I thought. Maybe he looked at the evidence and decided it didn't matter. Maybe he loves her enough to forgive her. Maybe I did all of this for nothing. Days passed. Still nothing. And then one morning I got a notification. Mallory had deleted her Instagram. I checked her Facebook, gone. Her Twitter, gone. Every trace of her social media presence wiped clean overnight. I searched for Ethan online. His profiles were still there, but every photo of Mallory had been removed. Every mention of their relationship deleted. His relationship status changed from engaged to nothing at all. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. He'd believed me. He'd looked at the evidence, really looked at it, and he'd made his decision. 2 weeks after I met Ethan for coffee, the engagement was off, and my sister lost the image-obsessed family she had so desperately tried to buy her way into. It was a strange feeling seeing justice after so long. Not the swift, decisive kind you see in movies, but the slow, agonizing grind of truth. Part of me mourned the wreckage, the broken family, the pain. But a larger, truer part of me felt a profound sense of peace. The curse, after all, wasn't my left hand. It was the lies, the fear, and the willful blindness that my parents and sister chose to live by. And I had finally shattered it. What about you? If you were in Eliza's shoes, would you have paid for Mallory's tuition? Or would you have fought to expose the truth, no matter the cost? Let me know in the comments below.